It may not look like it, but we're in the middle of a heat wave here in Brisbane at the moment. But in Australia, with searing heat comes the wet stuff as well. This year they predicted we were going to go into drought. It's the wettest drought I've ever lived through. I think the El Nino was supposed to disappear and the Southern Oscillation Index had changed. And they were predicting one of the worst droughts in history. But we've had nothing but rain for a couple of days. Now, they're predicting a lot of rain over the next couple of weeks as well. There's a lot of low fronts that are about to move across Australia. A cyclone that's about to form. So yeah, it looks like we're going to get a wetter summer than normal. We've had a couple of ripper thunderstorms as well. That's been really interesting, especially here because there's a lot of iron in these hills and that attracts the lightning. We've had a couple of strikes just over the back fence and a couple all the way up through there. And yeah, it's been an interesting summer so far. But brewing must go on because this beer is not going to brew itself. And today we're going to brew a lawnmower beer. It's just a single mash and single hop beer, or a SMaSH beer. And it's just going to be something that's easy drinking on a hot summer's day. You can pull one out of the fridge, you can pour one off the tap, and just sit down at the end of a long mowing session and rehydrate yourself. Without any further ado, let's get into the recipe and then get into the brew day. As you can see, this recipe is pretty simple. We've got one grain, which is our Thomas Fawcett Golden Promise Pale Malt, and for a 25 litre batch you'll need 5.65 kilograms. With the hops we're going for Citra, but we're using two types of Citra. So even though there's two types, it's still the same hop. So it still qualifies as a SMaSH beer. 30 grams of Citra into the boil at 60 minutes to give us 35.9 IBUs. Then 10 grams of Cryo Citra into the hop stand for 2 IBUs. And then another 20 grams of Cryo Citra at the end of primary fermentation for the dry hop. Our yeast on this one is the Yeast Labs 1318 London Ale 3 yeast. And this is the yeast that I washed after the hazy IPA that I brewed a little while back. Our mash profile, again, very simple. We'll be striking at 65, not at 69.3. As I've explained before, in summer, I find that I don't lose any temperature when I add the grain. I'll be striking at 65. Then a 60-minute mash. I'll let the grain settle for 10 minutes before I turn on the recirculation pump. And just a simple 60-minute mash, and then mash out for 10 minutes at 75. After we sparge, we're doing a simple 60-minute boil with our bittering addition added at the 60-minute mark. At the 10-minute mark, we'll add our aroma hops, and we'll also add in our Werflock and yeast nutrients as well. Once we've cooled fermentation, again, this is a very simple beer. We're keeping it very simple. Primary will be at 18 degrees Celsius and 1 bar of pressure, just to make sure that that yeast gives us a nice clean profile. And that'll take around about 8 days. Once that's complete, we'll go into secondary fermentation with the dry hop for 2 days and only 2 days. You don't want to go any longer than that or you risk getting hop burn. Then we're going to cold crash at 1 Celsius for 3 days and then into the kegs for carbonation. The water profile I've used on this is for a pale ale that's got 117 parts per million of calcium, 18 of magnesium, 26 of sodium, 55 of chloride, 295 of sulfate and 43 of carbonate. The style I've used for this beer is an American pale ale, so it'll come out a little bit hoppier. And the stats we've gone with here, ABV of 5%, an OG of 1050 and a final gravity of 1012, so nothing over the top there. EBC is 9.5. It's a little bit low, but that's because we're only using a single malt. And again, because this beer isn't going into a competition, it doesn't really matter. We're brewing it for flavour, not for, not to try and win medals. IBUs of 38, and that'll give us a nice amount of bitterness in there, just to balance the hops in the dry hop as well. And a BUG ratio of 0.76. That's the recipe in a nutshell, so let's get on with the brew day. So what's a SMaSH beer, I hear you ask? Well, SMaSH beer is a single malt and single hop beer. And the reason we make these is to get a feeling for the ingredients that we're using, and to see what flavours they give us, what characteristics they bring to the beer. And it gives us an idea for future brewings, what we can do with them. We're using this brew house today because it's only a single batch, so I don't need to use the big brew house. I'm using it as my hot liquor tank, and it'll heat up the sparge water and the strike water. So it's going at the moment. We've got our RO system. This is the first test of our RO system, and it's headed into there at the moment. And we've got about 40 litres or so in there at the moment. We've got a mash pH of 5.45, which is just a nice mash pH. I'll take a sample at 10 minutes and I'll test the pH and just adjust if need be, either with an acid to bring the pH down, or with bicarb soda to bring it up a little. I'm going to try just crushing that grain directly into the brew house, rather than going from bucket to bucket and then tipping it in, and just see how that goes. Water's measured out, in go our salts. This is a bit of an experiment, so let's just see what happens. Okay, so we're all doughed in. It's a nice thin mash, so no problems with dough balls. We're recirculating very slowly at the moment, just because it is quite full. It is quite a full, even though it's only 21 litres of water, you add the 5 kilos of grain in there and it does fill it up quite a lot. It's up to about there. So we're just recirculating really slowly at the moment, just to barely have the wort moving through the grain, and we start our mash tracker. 60 minutes and we'll be back to mash out. After 60 minutes, it was time to lift the grain basket and start the sparge. Then I heat it up to the boil, and you can see the first addition going in there, but you can also see the water bottle that I use just to deal with the hot break. With 15 minutes to go, we sanitize the plate chiller and take an OG reading. Cool it down, and then into the fermenter with all of that wort once it's cooled down to pitching temperature. Then the all-rounder gets reassembled, and it's a quick spray down all over just to sanitize everything and make sure it's all nice and clean. Primary fermentation was done in 6 days, then 2 days dry hopping and cold crash for 5 days just to clear the beer up. And here's the finished product. It's definitely an amber colour, see-through, quite nice. It's got good clarity. Some small bubbles rising up still. You can see them all the way through there. There's still carbonation. It's quite nicely carbonated. The head's fairly long lasting. I poured this 4 minutes ago now while I've been setting up, and there's still, as you can see, a little bit of head on there, so it's quite a long lasting head. I wouldn't say moussey, not by any stretch of the imagination. It was bubbly, quite a large bubble in that head too, so probably not the best, but yeah, quite nice. Now, when I poured it, you definitely get the Citra coming off it. The smell of that Citra hop. Not a lot in the way of malt shining through. And it's probably because of the Citra hop. So that might have been my first mistake, was using an American pale ale style. Because I'm getting, not much other than the Citra on the nose. There is a fair bit of bitterness in there. 38 IBUs, you can taste it. There is a lot of malt sweetness as well. I think this finished out at 10:06, so I think it started at 10:45 and finished at 10:06. So there's a tiny little bit of sweetness in there, but it's on the drier side of sweet. But you do get a little bit of malt sweetness in there. You also get a biscuity, almost bread dough, like just cooked bread dough, which would be called bread, I suppose. And it is now second sip, or third sip, or fourth sip, or whatever it is, it's quite a more pronounced malt flavour there. The backbone of this is quite nice. It is a good summer sipper. Now, I have changed my position on these beers, SMaSH beers. I used to think that a SMaSH beer was probably something that anyone could do, and you can. I mean, it's quite easy to brew a SMaSH beer. But the problem is, because they are a single malt, single hop, there's nowhere to hide your mistakes. If you make any mistakes in this beer, it's going to come through very pronounced. Whereas if I'd thrown in a little bit of victory malt or some carapils or something like that, it would give it more depth. This is very one-dimensional. It's a very one-dimensional beer. And as long as you're not expecting anything more than that, then I suppose it's a good beer. I have made some fantastic SMaSH beers in the past, but they were more with Pilsner malts and pale malts. So my thoughts are this on SMaSH beers. If you want to have a go, then have a go. If you've got some grain lying around and you just want to get a quick brew on and you've got some grain and some hops, then yeah, why not try it? If you're a beginner, this isn't your first beer. This is a beer where you know a little bit about all grain brewing and you want to experiment a little bit. I wanted to see what the Thomas Fawcett Golden Promise was going to do. Because I haven't brewed with this a lot, it's an experiment for me. I've distilled with this, so I've created whiskies out of Golden Promise, and they were quite nice, quite doughy and bready. You definitely got those biscuity, well, not biscuity, but yeah, more baked goods flavours come through into the whiskey. But as a beer, I don't think this is something that I would brew again. I wouldn't use just Golden Promise. But it serves its purpose for me now to know what the Golden Promise is like. And now when I make a beer with Golden Promise in it, I know what that beer is going to do. And it's a nice clean fermentation. There's no real yeast influence, so that the London Ale 3 from Y Yeast, because it was pressure fermented, you didn't get a lot of that berry expression coming through that you can when you ferment with that slightly warmer. So as I said, if you're a new brewer, maybe give yourself a couple of brews, 10, 12 or so, of brewing all grain, different styles of all grain, before you try one of these, because you need to know what your ingredients are going to do before you get a successful one of these. And as I said, a smash beer made with pale malt or Pilsner malt, absolute gorgeous beers. Low hop rate, so I wouldn't go for a 38 IBU with this again. I might knock this back to a 25 or even 20 for something like this. But it's worth experimenting with, and you don't get better in your craft if you don't experiment, if you're not constantly trying out new things. If you're only ever doing what everyone else has ever done, you'll only ever get what everyone else has ever got. So go out there and experiment. Give yourself a little bit of knowledge before you do it though. And enjoy yourself, enjoy your beer. And enjoy what comes of it. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell so that you get informed of when new content's coming out. Give us a big like, pass us on to your friends. If you know people who are brewers or interested in getting into brewing, let them know about this channel. And keep an eye out because I'm starting to get set up on Patreon and I'll have an announcement about that soon. But now, as I say, enjoy the hobby, but drink responsibly.